All right. So the images that you have in your mind define how far you can reach and what you're going to define. And the maps you have also define where you're going to look and what opportunities you're going to look for. And today, as airmen, we like to say we're airspace and cyber. So I'm going to ask you some questions about what is your mental map about space. Space is changing in some pretty exciting ways. We have some brand new players in the space environment, both domestically in terms of what our private sector is bringing, and in terms of what other players external to the United States are bringing. And the images that are bouncing around in their minds, I'm pretty sure, are different than what's bouncing around in the minds of most airmen. For most of what we've, for those of you who are close to my age, our images of space are pretty much synonymous with government. And what has happened? Progress is within the palm. And if you have a map of space, it probably looks something like this. You probably think about orbits, and it's probably very geocentric. What I'm going to tell you is that that's not where the leaders in the field are thinking now. And this is not the map that is going to allow us to be the force that we need to be in the future. The minimum map that you will need going forward is this. It's called a cislunar map that includes the moon and the libration points where the gravity and momentum forces balance. You may think of a near-Earth object as something like this, a plot of where the satellites and space debris are around planet Earth. Again, a geocentric image. But this is the map that we're going to need going forward, certainly for the next 50 to 100 years. This is a map of the inner solar system where you can see the Earth, and then the outer green belt that you can see is the asteroid belt. This is where the focus of American and foreign industry and national power is moving. So it wasn't too long ago that we only knew about one asteroid. Now, largely as a result of Air Force leadership that happened about the time of Spacecast 2020, we began looking for more asteroids, and we have found just a tremendous number. But as you can see, even among the largest, the planet-killing near-Earth asteroids, we're still missing a bit. We don't know where all of the serial killers in our neighborhood are. But as you get smaller, down to city killer size, we basically don't know where most of those are. And as our space situational awareness improves, the chance of a president having to make a decision about some kind of deflection becomes a problem. And to what extent does the Air Force consider that part of its mission set, the protection of planet Earth or our cities? Is this your image of a meteor in your head? Is that what animates your thoughts? Because this is the image of asteroids and meteors that is animating the thoughts of the folks who are the industry leaders. They see it as a tremendous resource and gold mine. The smallest stony metallic asteroid is valued at something like $33 trillion. Is this your image of what you think human presence in outer space can be? Or is it this? This is, of course, a government intergovernmental facility. Or is this your image going forward? A completely privately owned and operated by a U.S. company called Bigelow? Or is this your image of where you think America can be? Of a much, much huger volume that's by another private company? Or is this as far as your imagination can think? A space colony that can host 20 million people built out of asteroidal material that was designed in the 1970s in NASA studies. When you think about where America is going in space, are you thinking about landing 3 people in a tin can on some place? Or are you thinking about what was the consensus of all the industry leaders who gathered last month in D.C. to say this is where America should go? Enable human settlement and a thriving space economy. Because if we as airmen are not thinking in those terms, are not surfing to where the society is, how are we playing that role that Mahan, for instance, enabled with the navalists? Is this your idea of in-space construction? An astronaut with a wrench fixing Hubble? Or is this your image of in-space construction, where you've got a autonomous robotic 3D printer building infinitely large structures on orbit? When you think about the moon, do you think about it as just a place that we landed and looked at? There was nothing there except a bunch of dust? Or do you think about it as others think about it? That this is the sustainable resource. This is the 8th continent. That there is valuable stuff there to mine and make money on. And are you, like some American companies, looking to actually build hardware to do it? And to go after that and pursuing funding abroad because they're not getting it here and not having the advocacy internally? Because others are thinking that way. The strategic competitors of the United States certainly consider the possibilities of space in terms of its ability to bring development and economic benefit to the world. When you think about launch vehicles, is this the idea you have in your head? A giant government project beating our chest that we are the strongest nationalist force out there, owned by the government? Or is this your idea? A completely reusable private industry that launches and sorties many times and services not just the government but many commercial players and is met up on orbit by gas stations in space that extend the reach and maneuver of space vehicles in the same way that air refueling does to air power. When you think of a launch site, is your image of a launch site like this? Or is your image of a launch site like where the industry is trying to go, of commercial space hubs that allow very, very high volumes? Or is it even limited to that? Or are you thinking about the ability to put not tens, not hundreds, but thousands upon thousands of sorties into space in order to really have a significant commercial enterprise? Because this is a project at NASA Ames. This is a project from NASA headquarters. This is what we have innovation challenges. These two other companies that are looking at beamed launch. When you think about space, are you thinking about one-off things, or are you thinking about grand ideas of architectures for space logistics? Because there are airmen thinking about this. This was the work of Mike Sneed at AFRL. And when you think about in-space transportation, does it look like that? Because these are the images that are bouncing around the heads of the industry leaders and our competitors. When you think of a satellite, is that the image you have in your head? Or is this the image you have in your head? A 7-kilometer wide solar power satellite that can bring 1 to 10 gigawatts down on the planet, and that building a series of these can scale to all global energy demand, completely redefining the security and energy architecture of the planet and our ability to come and go into the solar system and beyond. Because other people are thinking about it, how Japan plans to build it, how China's planned to build it, Northrop Grumman and Caltech, their recent announcement just last week, India's president. What if they are right? Are you designing and building an air force to match? Are you designing and building a space force that can cope with that kind of change in activity? And are you promoting that for the United States so that we can have the benefits of those capabilities rather than others? And what does that look like? Does it look like the old government program? Or does it look like something that's deeply enabled and facilitated in public-private partnership? And what is the role of airmen in that narrative? Just like what was the role of folks like Mahan in the navalist sea power era? How do we catalyze something, a future that we want to have? Because we were first. We were first in Air Force 2020. We were first in Spacecast 2020. We were first in Air Force 2025. We were first as airmen in the executive agent for space, who said that space-based solar power is the strategic opportunity that could significantly advance. And yet, others have got programs, but the United States does not have an encouraging program for this. So this is sort of a future that you can expect is going to be built for you. Are you ready for this? You're going to see a future that has space solar power satellites, that has asteroid mining, where the moon is an important resource and an important destination, where you've got on-orbit facilities that are commercially operated, and where you've got the ability as a second-generation space industrial power to build things on orbit, to refuel, to service things on orbit. And what is the role of an Air Force, or whatever daughter service we give birth to, in this world? So some concluding thoughts here. There's going to be a space economy. Whether or not we lead, whether or not we enable it, is up to us and our decision about what we want to do with our own narrative. It's going to move from being just bits to energy and material and atoms. The question is, are we ready to facilitate it? Asteroids are going to become much more important, both for planetary defense and for mining. There will be a transportation revolution in space. It's a question of when and whether or not we deliberately bring it about. But transportation is not a Moore's Law technology. It's a deliberate attempt to overcome difficulty in order to move and gain new freedom of action. And at the center of that is your power regime and how you can collect and move power. Future comprehensive national power is going to require a focus on becoming a second-generation space industrial power. What are we, as airmen, doing to facilitate and bring about that future? And that concludes my talk.